Hello, my lovely class. Welcome to today's class. Welcome to StudyWave Academy, where education is without limits. Now, welcome to our English class. Welcome, and today we're going to be majorly Today we're going to be majorly focusing on what we call literature. So we're going to be talking about literature. What is literature? We're going to be understanding this literature, types of literature, just what is literature at large, okay? So that's going to be our major focus for today. Now, let's welcome ourselves back to class and bring our minds to class and try to get all the knowledge we know about literature, everything we know about literature. What is it? What does it entail? Everything that you might know about literature will be very, very important in today's class. So now let's move to the discussion of the class, and we're going to first start with what is literature. I love beginning my class whereby we get to know every term, get to understand what every term means, and just get an overview of what we're talking about. So now, what is literature? So literature is just written or spoken work that has an artistic and intellectual value. So what is literature? It is just a spoken or written work. So it can be spoken or written, but it must have an artistic or intellectual value, okay? It encompasses a wide range of creative and expressive text, including novels, short stories, poetry, plays, essays, and more. So everything that is entailed in what literature is. So when we talk about literature, we're talking about short stories, we're talking about novels, we're looking at poems, we're looking at plays. So I know most of us in class now, our level now allows us to have experienced all these types here, or maybe some of these types here. So I know we're conversant with what novels are. For those who don't know, novels are just like storybooks or books that have large volumes, and they talk about a specific story or a specific narrative, or they just give us a story about a specific character or a certain occurrence, okay? So a novel is just like a book. So that's it. So I know most of us have come across novels, we've come across short stories, we've come across poems, plays, essays, and even in our last class, if you remember very well, of which I expect all of us to remember, we know what essays are because we've talked about essays. We've looked at the different types of essays and everything that essays entail, okay? So we've talked about this already. So just know that literature is all this put together. It is a wide range of creative and expressive texts. Everything that we've come across so far, like the essays, like short stories, everything is part of literature. So now you can see how wide and diverse literature is. It includes all spoken and written work, and this work are written artistically and in an intellectual manner. So now I guess you understand what literature really entails, okay? So now literature often serves as a means of storytelling, conveying ideas, emotions, and experiences through language. So literature is it's just a form or a means of which we storytell, or we tell our stories to people. And these stories, we basically tell them to people because we want to convey a certain idea, we want to convey a certain emotion, or just an experience through spoken or written language, okay? So that's what literature is. It is just all about the written and spoken work. And this written and spoken work has been done in an artistic way and in an intellectual manner, okay? So this is what literature is all about, okay? So now let's jump to our introduction now. We want to introduce now this literature. We want to now come in term with it and even understand it deeper as we continue studying literature. So just know that today's focus or today's class will be based on literature and what literature is, okay? So literature is the written or spoken expression of human ideas, emotions, and experiences. So I've already talked about this, and I've told you that literature is written or spoken word. And here we're just saying it's written or spoken expression of human ideas, emotions, and experiences. So you express these ideas, you express these emotions or experiences through written work or through spoken work. So that is all about literature, okay? It is a rich and diverse form of artistic communication encompassing a wide range of texts, and this text includes fictional, non-fictional, poetry, drama, essays. Everything we know about text is all included in literature work, okay? The study of literature allows us to explore different worlds, characters, and ideas, providing insights into the human condition and the world around us. So basically, we study literature because we want to explore different worlds. When you talk about non-fictional text, we will look at this. What do we talk about, or what do we mean when we say something is non-fiction and something is fiction, okay? So fiction is something that is not true, something that is like, for example, fiction stories are like animal stalking, such stories. Non-fictions are true stories, things that are realistic. So with fiction stories, they are not realistic things, okay? But when you talk about non-fiction stories, these are realistic things. We have poetry, we have drama. We know what drama is. Drama is more of plays, so I guess we understand what drama is, okay? We have essays, and again, just to repeat this poem, I talked about essays in our last class, and we discussed what essays are, okay? We talked about different types of essays or examples of essays, okay? So just notice all these are what we talk about when we want to understand what literature is. And when you, again, I will repeat, the differences between fiction stories and non-fiction stories is, with fiction stories, they are untrue stories or invented stories or imaginary for that thing, for that case. So these are stories where we imagine animals talking, we imagine plates and cups talking, food talking. Okay, so we imagine things. We want to live in a world where we invent our own characters and give them our own characteristic of how we want them to behave. But when you come to the non-fiction world, this is a true world. It's very, very true. It's something real, and it's real things happening. So that's the difference between fiction and non-fiction. Don't forget that. So class, I hope you understand like what this literature is in general. What do we mean when we talk about literature? I hope you understand that, okay? So after the introduction of literature, I want us now to jump in and look at something very important, and that is what literature entails. We're going to be looking at just what is this literature? When we talk about literature, what is included in this literature? What do we mean? What is entailed in this literature, okay? So that's going to be our major focus for today. What is entailed in this literature that we're talking about? And the first thing that we're going to be looking at is genres and literature, or genres of literature. Genres or genres or genres, the way you say it, it depends with how you understand it or how your pronunciation is, okay? So sorry about that. So when you talk about different genres or different genres of literature, we're mainly talking about literature comes in many different forms. So in our 7th grade class, we will begin by exploring various genres such as fiction and non-fiction. So genres are basically types of literature, and when I talk about types, we have various types of various examples of genres, okay? So an example here, we have a type known as fiction, non-fiction, we have poetry, drama, and prose, okay? So all these examples that I'm giving you are examples of genres, and what I mean by genres is types. Literature comes in many different forms, okay? So genres are just forms, or they're types of literature, or the forms, the different forms in which literature comes in, okay? So do not confuse this word. It's an ambiguous word, but very, very simple to understand and very, very simple to explain it. So a genre is just a type or a form, and we're saying literature comes in different genres, and I've given you examples of these types of literature. We have fiction literature, we have non-fiction literature, we have poetry, we have drama, and we have prose, okay? So when you talk about fiction literature, this is just, like I said, they're imaginary and creative stories that may include novels and short stories. So these are stories we imagine, where our plants talk, cups and plates talk. Those are imaginary stories, and that is what we call fiction, okay? When you talk about non-fiction, these are actually factual and informative text. They include biographies, essays, and memoirs. Okay, so when we talk about biographies, these are stories we write about other people. For example, the life or the childhood life or of the Nigerian president, for example. It's a true thing that happened. Okay, so when we write about this, we are writing about a non-fiction story. And what do I mean by non-fiction? It's something that is factual, something that is true. Okay, so we have biographies too, essays and memoirs. Okay, all these are examples of genres found in literature. Also, another type is the poetry. These are expressive, and often lyrical composition that use language in unique ways. We know what poems are. Okay, poems basically just talk about an idea or just express an emotion. You express it through poems, and poems are composed in a language that is unique. Okay, so we know poems, we've heard of poems, we've read some poems. So poetry is also a genre in literature. Okay, next we have drama. Drama are basically plays and scripts meant for performance on stage. For example, the teacher, a theory teacher tells you to act out the birth of Jesus, or act out the crucifixion of Jesus. When you're acting out, this is just drama. You're performing it on stage, or you're performing it to a certain audience. Okay, so that is what drama is. And drama is another example of a fiction, or it's an example of a genre. It's a genre in literature. Okay, and then also dramas, you can have a non-fictional drama and fiction drama. Okay, so non-fiction drama is whereby you act something that really happened. You act a true story or a true occurrence. For example, maybe you act for the fight for independence in Nigeria during the colonial period. These are things that happened, and you want to just act them out so that you can get a better understanding. But when you talk about fiction drama, this is just something you imagine, where you imagine yourself maybe as a dog, or you imagine yourself as a cat, and you try act this out, act some different types of animals, or act as if you're a lion and your friend is a deer. Anything you think about and put yourself in that shoe. So basically, fiction is just something that is not true. It is something invented. But when you come to non-fiction, it's something that is true, something that is factual, something that is informative. Okay, do not forget about that. Then lastly, we have prose. Prose are written or spoken language in its ordinary form without rhythmic or poetic structure. Prose are just like sentences, or they're just something that is written or spoken language, very, very ordinary, without any rhythm or poetic structure. So the way we write poems, and we include stanzas in poems, we include such things in poems. So with prose they're just written. They don't have any structure the way we have a structure in poem. They're just written. So the first major feature that I talked about that is found in literature is different genres of literature. Okay, so the first one I've looked at is the genres. Okay, so that is what literature entails. I will move on and look at another genre here, and that is literary elements. So you learn about the fundamental elements that make up a literary work, okay, such as plot, character, setting, theme, point of view, and symbolism. Understanding these elements is crucial for analyzing and interpreting literature. So what is another thing that literature entails? It entails literary elements, and these elements are like character. We know what a character is, we know what a plot is, we know who characters are. Okay, so we know what a setting is, we know what a theme is, a point of view, symbolism. So such elements too, we call them literary elements. They're elements that help us write or perform or speak out a certain context or a certain text in literature. Okay, so for example, plot is just the flow of a narrative, of the flow of a story. Characters are people or things or anything that is doing the action in your story. So such things are the literary forms we talk about in literature. So that's the second element that must be found in literature. So the literary elements. Okay, so we talked about the first one is the genres or the different types, and the second one we're talking about is the literary elements, and I've told you these elements already. Okay,